Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Merry Christmas, everybody, because today is essentially Christmas Eve. The day we're releasing this, Michael. It will be Christmas Eve. So
okay, I'll go with it then. Merry Christmas.
There you go.
We're recording in Advent
Christmas
because this is what we do.
And So it is an Advent. We are recording an Advent as an Advent of what will be released on Tuesday. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And the gift that was given to us this week or last week was the War of the Rohirrim, which Michael and I were one of the 74 people who saw here in America.
Yeah,
it was
crazy. I took my family, my older kids anyway, and
so how many of you went to see it?
Total of five.
Okay.
Myself and four older kids.
I beat you out. We had all six of us. All six of my family went and saw it.
And we were literally the only people in the theater.
Oh wow, that's
9:00 show. So I guess it's the later show.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah,
we were there were probably, let's see, there were six of us. There were probably another 10 people in the theater, maybe a little bit more for us, but we saw it on Tuesday at 7:00. So we saw it on the cheap day here at the theater. So because I've got 6 kids, you got to somehow make it worthwhile. I'll be curious to hear what your kids thought about it. Before we do, hey, in our extended podcast, I didn't even tell you this, Michael, what we're going to do. We're going to actually have our revisions to the film. What would we have changed in the War of the Rohirrim? We're going to talk about that, and
we can't say everything, right?
You can't say everything because there was some stuff that was true to what Tolkien actually wrote. So you can't say everything. That's true. But we can be as we can use an axe or we can use a chisel. I have a feeling that the larger devices will be coming in handy as we look at what we would change. But if you want to hear that, subscribe, become a member, go to theonering.com/member, and you can get the extended podcast. You can join our Discord chat, and it's $4 a month. First month is free. And we really appreciate it. As the year draws to a close, we want to say thanks to all of you members who keep us going. Who got Michael? Oh, Michael has a new microphone. We weren't able to set it up quite yet because we have to get the right headphones now.
Just arrived.
So we'll move that
in the new year. We'll have a new microphone.
That's right. And also, I think on Christmas Day we'll be releasing our reading of Noel, Tolkien's Lost Christmas Poem that was discovered 11 years ago, to everybody again, read by Austin Robertson. It's a great reading and. I think it's approaching 25,000 views on YouTube now. Last year we got like 80,000 views on Twitter. So people really love to hear Tolkien's words spoken with such a nice mellifluous voice like Austin Robertson's. And so look for that on Christmas Day.
It's a classic.
It is. But everybody will get that. You don't have to be a member to hear that. Again, but we appreciate the support. theonering.com/member. Okay, let's go through the War of the Rohirrim. So right now the movie stands at it's made $11.5 million so far on a $30 million budget worldwide. I think it's made like $8 million in the US. So our predictions. Michael predicted that it would make $200 million worldwide. I don't think it's going to make $20 million worldwide. I think it's not even going to do that. So I thought it'd make over $100 million, but nope, nowhere near that at all.
And this is one of the most interesting things to me is why. I just thought that the Lord of the Rings appeal would be enough and the anime style would be enough to gain, but it apparently just fell flat. What do you think?
Well, I've never been a fan of anime. I think that taking Middle-earth and making it into a cartoon, which is how I think of anime, kind of belittles the world a little bit. And I think that with the bar set by Peter Jackson and the visual representation of Middle-earth, to diminish it into anime is something a lot of people just don't care about. I don't think anime has that much of a following here. So when you say it's anime rather than just animated, I think you actually lose more people. I think it would have been a computer generated animation rather than an anime. I think it probably would have done actually better. if it was done with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was thinking that it might get a bump because anime is so popular from a worldwide perspective versus just an American perspective. But you might be right. You might be right. That's interesting.
But I think it's popular. Anime is popular because it's there, like, it's an established art form in Japan. It's like the Japanese like visual art form that they're known for. And so when you have a very popular anime film come out, it's done by people that have the track record that demands that those folks in Japan particularly see it, and in other Eastern countries. So I don't know. So that's number one. Number two, it's a story nobody really wanted that much. And number three, once people saw, I think there was a large amount, I don't know what percentage, but I think there's a large amount that saw like, oh, we saw Galadriel in the Rings of Power. Now we've got Hera in the War of the Rohirrim. I don't really care. And I think also the wake of the Rings of Power left very little for people to look forward to, right? It diminished Middle Earth somewhat. And so I don't think anybody really cares. If the Rings of Power were super popular and people loved it, I think War of the Rohirrim would have done better. But it's kind of like, we have all these dumb Star Wars shows on Disney Plus now that I haven't seen. But the new show, what is it, Skeleton Crew, that came out, didn't even crack the top 10 of streaming in the first week it came out. And this is like Star Wars, which is considered, the American mythos, the thing that everybody's seen, and it just can't draw people. And so I think that diminishment of the worlds that we've loved through the media and the hunger of the fiscal hunger of these corporations has left it wanting. And so I think people just don't care. That's my thinking. What's your thinking?
And I'm not sure if I'm right about this because I haven't dug into a lot of the details. I know a lot of people have online. But isn't it true that this War of the Rohirrim was indeed a manifestation of that fiscal hunger that you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
They're just putting something out so that they can keep the rights to it. Is that right? Warner
That's
Brothers?
Right. They had to have another. They needed to use it in order to retain it. So I mean, so it cost them $30 million to make the movie. So I guess that's cheaper than spending another $250 million to regain it at some point, just like Amazon did with the Rings of Power and the licenses they have for that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point about brand damage. Like over time, if you have low quality stuff that comes out for any world, any storyline, Star Wars, Superman, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, whatever
Marvel
it is.
Now,
a Marvel. If over time your product gets either better or worse, as has been sadly the case, the worse is usually the way it's gone in the last decade. But if your stuff has gone whatever direction it goes, that will increase or decrease the value of the brand, and people will want to see it less or more depending on which direction you're going.
Agreed.
So should we jump into synopsis here?
All right. So synopsis. The movie starts. Since I know most of you haven't seen it and won't see it, and it's very different from what Tolkien actually wrote.
Spoilers? Should we say spoilers?
Spoilers. This whole show is spoilers. So don't, like, if you want to watch the movie, go watch the movie and then listen to this later. All right. So the movie starts with Hera riding her horse somewhere in Rohan up to a large rocky outcropping where she feeds an eagle of Manwë with a large drumstick pulled from her satchel on her horse. Other than that, then I guess she rides back to Rohan at this point. I'm trying to remember everything. Back in Rohan, however, now she rides back. Freka comes into Meduseld, into the hall there, demanding angry that Helm is going to marry off his daughter to somebody in Rohan. At the same time, Helm does in Gondor, yeah. So at the same time, Helm does insult him for being fat. So I appreciated that part of the film. That was good.
Lore accurate.
So he wants Hera instead to marry Wolf, who we find out they were good friends as children, playing at sword fighting together. And of course, the only scene we see with them in sword fighting is Hera besting him. But Hera is uninterested, and she says, I will marry no man. Literally, not, I am no man, I will marry no man. So Freka is refused with more barbed words from Helm, and they agree to take it outside. Helm kills Freka with a single blow, and Wolf vows revenge. Fast forward a few years. Wolf hasn't been heard from at all. I think in the book, in the appendices, it's 4 years essentially. And at this point, Hera and Freylaf, her cousin, are out riding. She does have a brother, Hama and Haleth, and they're not really in the story yet.
Oh wait, is it Haleth? Sorry, I just switched to the woman.
Not
Haleth. What's the what's the more manly son's name? Just went blank on it. Hama is the
Haleth. It is
Hama
Haleth.
is the,
Yeah, no, it's Haleth.
It is Haleth.
Okay. They share the name. So Hama and Haleth are not in the story yet. Hera and Freylof are out riding together because she's the best horseman in all of Rohan, and they encounter a dead Southrun warrior who Hera realizes is a Mumakil tamer. The Mumakil appears and is apparently rabid, I guess, is angry and rabid. And Freylof draws them away, but to save Hera and Olwen is the shield maiden who's with Hera all the time. Hera then decides to save Freylof by luring it away. Goes into a forest that has a watcher in the swamp, not a watcher in the water. It's a watcher in the swamp that eats and devours the entire Mumakil whole. Like apparently its mouth gets. I was like, whoa, that's okay. That's big, and it has a tree on its head. It somehow the roots are
a little island. In fact, a bunch of trees.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it looks like a little humpy island in the middle of a swamp, and it devours the Mumakil. At the same time, once it's devoured, she there is captured by Targ, which I believe is also the name of the Klingon dogs, the Targs. Targ is one of Freka's generals, and she's taken to Wolf's stronghold. She's kidnapped, taken to his stronghold, and we realize Wolf has become his stronghold at Isengard. Sorry, Wolf now has become High Lord of the Dunlendings, and he reveals his plot to attack Rohan. Hera offers to marry him. He says no because she's not marrying for love. Which, okay, we'll talk about that later. She is then rescued by her shield maiden, or the shield maiden Olwen, who literally explodes a door with her legs. I guess that's what it seemed like to me.
Yep.
As she comes in, she somehow gets there. She somehow gets I was about to say Eowyn, Hera away, and Freylof is left behind to pick off the bad guys with his bow and arrow. They return to Meadowcell to tell the king, Helm, about Wolf's big army, but Helm and the lords there scoff at the notion of retreating to Dunharrow, and Freylof, because that was what he was promoting, is cast out for being a coward, and so Helm prepares battle with Lord Thorn, who has promised to raise, I think it was 300 men or something along those lines.
It was 300, that's correct.
Yeah, the Rohirrim then leave at night because apparently that's when Dunlendings attack. And at the same time, Hera finds Lord Thorn's scroll and sees the seal on it and recognizes it as Wolf's, realizing that Lord Thorn is a traitor. She is then confronted by him as she attempts to leave to warn her father, but she is able to kill him with the help of her horse. And so now, instead of going to her father, she and Olwen, the shield maiden, evacuate Edoras. I don't know why they decided to do that instead of warning her father. Might have been helpful. We're sending somebody to warn her father. Okay, sorry. We'll get into the plot later. She's now, so she's leaving, and all the women are leaving, just like in the Two Towers. They're leaving to go to Helms Deep, up the Hornburg at this point. And it's at this point that the Dunlendings attack with Oliphants, and Helm, of course, is betrayed since there are no additional riders from Lord Thorn. The Oliphants take down the gate, but not before Hera can kill one. Course, I think she's the only one that is able to do that. Edoras is then sacked, and Haleth is killed by an arrow through his throat, and Helm is also shot, but Hera and Hama save him, and then they ride to the Hornburg. Now, one thing I forgot to tell you. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, just to be clear, both Hera and Haleth kill an Oliphant.
Oh, Haleth does too. Okay,
he kills it before he dies.
Okay, that's right. Oh, that's right. He's on top of it, and he's shot. He's shot through the neck as he's standing on its corpse, right? Is that right?
Yes. He has just killed its riders down to and he's standing victorious over its corpse and gets shot in the neck.
Okay. So then they ride to the Hornburg, but earlier, right before they went to battle, we did have Hera tell Hama, the younger brother, that your horse is too slow, you should get a better horse, and he says, no, this old girl has been with me through much, and I will keep her as long as she's able to carry me. Essentially, that's what he says. So he's got a slow horse. And so as they retreat to Helms Deep, he falls behind, the Hornburg. He falls behind and is captured by Wolf and Targ. Wolf brings him to the near the walls of the Hornburg, and Hera and Helm, and I guess some others, watch him slit his throat in front of Hera and Helm. Right, okay. So begins... Wolf
slit Hama's throat.
That's right. Wolf kills Hama in front of Hera and Helm from a distance.
Right.
So begins the siege of Helm's Deep. They begin the construction of what looks like the Burj Khalifa, the Empire State Building. Some large skyscraper is going up that's in scaffolding of some sort in there. And at the same time, Helm is not getting better. He's lying there. He's sick. But we realize he's actually feigning his illness, as far as I understood it, because he's leaving every night through a secret door in his room to slay Dunlendings. He becomes a fearful wraith to them. And so, they say, it's unnatural, it's not human. But he does go out and kill them in his, his sleeveless tunic, essentially, like large, big, like biceps and triceps, and like very, very, very ripped. He's going out there in the deep cold. He reminds me of an NFL player, actually. Okay, in any case, I digress. Hera discovers this secret door and finds, as she goes out and looks to see what's going on, she finds some orcs looking for rings in here. She's then attacked by these orcs, and Helm first saves Hera from these orcs, but then Helm is bested by a large orc, and Hera saves him. They're now discovered by the Dunlendings, and so they have to retreat back to the front gate of Helms Deep, of the Hornburg, because there was some rocks falling that closed the cave that they had exited the Helms Deep from. So Helm then sacrifices himself at the gate so Hera can get back into safety and become the ruler of the world she was meant to be. And I wrote this down. So she says to him, Rohan still needs you, father. And he says, no, Hera, they need you. You are my pride, my joy. You could rule the world. So he sacrifices himself there.
So she could be Sauron.
I don't. Sacrifice is a pregnant word that means a lot more. He just dies there by killing people. There's no sacrifice in it because nothing's actually happening. Okay, we'll talk about that in the story in a minute. Okay, Hera then berates the lords for doing nothing. They're sitting there, and she's like, "Don't despair. We'll figure something out." So she comes up with a plan. After she's the one that realizes they're building a giant siege tower there. So she climbs up the nearby cliffs to a conveniently placed eagle's nest, and speaking to the eagle plainly, essentially tells it, you got to pick up Helm's armor and bring it to Dunharrow, where Freyalaf is. The eagle does this, and then Hera then confronts Wolf when the siege tower is lowered onto the walls. She challenges him to combat, and if she bests him, he will retreat. She does best him after he breaks his word by crushing his throat with a shield, just as Freyalaf arrives in Helm's armor. And so this was a good touch, right? Helm was out there killing everybody, and now they think he's a wraith, and now they see the shadow or the silhouette of Helm and Helm's armor up on the hillside, and it's actually Freyalaf, but all the Dunlendings thinks it's Helm, and so it drives them a little bit crazy. They drive away all the Dunlendings and win the day. Freyalaf then becomes king, though he does tell Hera, it should have been you. But Hera says, I never wanted a crown. It was meant for others. Saruman comes to Meadowsail to offer his assistance. And then, to close out the story with Olwen, Hera goes off to meet with Gandalf about these orcs that she saw picking up rings. The end. Did I cover it all? That was long. Sorry, guys.
Pretty much. Yeah, that was a very complete retelling.
All right, so let's go through...
Yeah.
Through 7 points. We have 7 things we're going to talk about. Animation and art, the music, the characters and acting, the dialogue, the story, the pacing, and then the lore. So we're going to try and go through these without getting into every single nook and cranny that we could possibly go into. So the animation and the art.
Go for it.
What do you think? What do you think? I'll kick it off to you, Michael. Animation, art, and we can rate this on a scale of
5-point scale. I'm gonna go to our 5-point scale. As our listeners know, we have an ongoing series where we look at the Peter Jackson films and what they changed from J.R.R. Tolkien's work, and we go through changes and we rate them on a number of aspects. And we use a 5-point scale. We don't have our fancy setup with the numbers today, but I am actually going to rate each of these areas 5 points. First of all, let me say overall, there were aspects of this movie that surprised me in both negatively and positively. In the positive way, there were some aspects, and we're going to talk about some of them first, that I actually liked. I thought they did a pretty decent job. So in animation and art, I have 2 takes because there are 2 distinctive animation styles and art styles, visually speaking. One is the anime part, and the other is the way the backgrounds are painted, kind of like those old Bugs Bunny episodes where the background is done in a different art style. The art style of the background, I'll start with the positive, I really liked. I liked the design, I liked the color, I liked the way the graphic rendering of Rohan, it was excellent in my opinion. And so I would actually give that a 4.5 out of 5 in terms of that background animation style. The foreground anime is a 2.4 because I do not like anime. I do not like the style that they did it in, and it was choppy. It was very sort of, and it was weird. There were a bunch of different animation styles at some points in some moments. There, like when things exploded, doors and gates and stuff. It looked, and then when some motion happened, it looked like they were almost, what is that called? The rotoscreen?
Rotoscoping.
Rotoscope. Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like they were rotoscoping it.
They were to be clear, they did use motion capture for some of the stuff. So,
okay.
So that's why it looked like rotoscoping.
So anyway, sometimes it looked natural, and then a lot of times it just looked jerky and low frame anime. That's my take on the animation.
All right. Well, so interesting. Yeah, I don't like anime. I've never enjoyed it. I've never thought it's my own thing. People have tried to get me onto it. Tried the things on Amazon, and I'm just like, it just, I can't get the idea back past the mental block that I'm watching a cartoon, and I'm not losing myself in the story whenever I'm watching a cartoon, and that's my own shortcoming, I guess. But like for me, when a movie is successful, it's because it makes me forget to be analytical about it, to just enjoy it. And I can never stop being analytical about a cartoon because it's just a cartoon.
Interesting.
Or very few cartoons do that. The one that did was The Emperor's New Groove because I couldn't stop laughing in that entire movie when I saw that like 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was a good one.
So what's funny when you said about the backgrounds were excellent. And my wife said to me, it's like, the best part of the animation was that beginning shot when they went from the map into the mountains and had that, and then you saw the eagles flying. That was beautiful. It looked really good, and on a big screen it worked out really well. So yeah, I think I had no problems with the backgrounds. I think they looked good. There were a couple ones like in the darkness of the scenes that looked a little bit less than precise, so I will give it a 4 out of 5. The front man, the character animation, the small scenes, the enclosed scenes, the close quarters, man, sometimes those characters looked off, especially when you got a little like half distance, like they weren't the foreground character in the scene. They looked almost goofily badly drawn. And I have some shots, but I'm not going to bring them up here because
especially the armies of evil armies. I really noticed how bad they were.
Yeah, and honestly, also some of the scenes with the other lords, right, where they're gathered around a table. They're like, you look at their faces and they look like their mouth is a little line, their nose is a little line, and there's nothing else there. But the one talking has more characterization into their face than they do. And maybe that's anime, but it just drew me out of the movie completely.
That's anime.
Completely. So I just didn't like it at all. Horses looked kind of weird at times, and I've heard that it's incredibly hard to draw horses. So I guess I'll give them that. But they looked really herky-jerky, especially when they tried to do a spinning shot around a horse at one time, where his movement just looked like he was floating a little bit. Didn't look right. And then there was some weird frame issues, like a normal film is 24 frames a second. The high, what is it called? The high frame rate HFR films that were The Hobbit that Peter Jackson released, I believe, were 48, so they were twice as fast. It felt like these things were like 10 at times, or even 8. Like it was really, really, really low amount of frame rates. And then sometimes it got really smooth. And then they used 3D animation in order to do explosions and things like that, or the siege tower falling, and it was super smooth. And it felt completely inconsistent, not like they were using slow motion, but like they were rushing it.
And it takes you out of that secondary world effect when it happens. When you have so many visual effects that are jarring with each other, when you have beautiful painted background scenes with rich colors and similar to what I have in my background behind me, that kind of painting style, and then you have motion capture weirdness, which looks kind of fluid and excellent from a certain perspective, but it's just jarring with the front end anime style, which is and then the herky jerky.
Yeah, didn't like it.
Slow frame rates. So agreed.
Yeah. All right. So that's the animation. I'll give it a 1 out of 5. It was no good. I didn't like it at all. Like it just drew me out of the film. So 1 out of 5 for that kind of animation. In told, I'd give the whole thing a 2 out of 5. Like I don't enjoy anime anyway, but some of the long scenes were nice, I guess. The music, right? So the music, it was written by Stephen Gallagher. Not familiar with him. I guess he worked on The Hobbit as like a music editor or something along those lines. I'd have to look up his IMDb. I don't have it in front of me right now. But he did work on The Hobbit as some sort of music associate. He did use cues from The Lord of the Rings. You hear the Ring theme a couple times. You hear Rohan's theme a number of times, and then Hera has her own theme. I listened to the music, and it's fine. It's good. I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Yep. It didn't take me away from the film at all, but it didn't make itself memorable at all like Howard Shore's does.
Exactly right. Yeah, I give it a 3.5 because it was decent. The parts that Howard Shore did really stuck out because they were just distinctly better.
100%.
And then that's it.
Which brings us into the characters and the acting, which are kind of the same. Like how are the characters portrayed, and then how are the actors in it? Let's start with Hera. She was fine as an acted character. I don't know. Do I want to get into what I think of Hera now? Let's start with Helm instead. Helm, okay. Brian Cox's Helm, his voice worked well for me. I thought he did a really good job with it. I didn't think about Brian Cox, even though I know exactly who he is and what he looks like when I was watching him. I did see Helm there, so he did a really good job, I thought, with that. I'll give him a 4 out of 5 with that. Hama and Haleth they were forgettable. They seemed interchangeable. That's both the characters that they created and the acting that they had done. So 3 out of 5 for them. The most annoying character, I think his name was Leaf, was the attendant. I'm not sure what kind of name he would be. He's the kid, the production assistant.
Yep. He's the member Berry Hobbit.
He's like, his annoyingness reminded me of that annoying kid in the Polar Express. Not that his voice was the same, but I was just as annoyed whenever he'd come on screen and was like, "Oh, I accidentally dropped all the papers." I'm like, "Oh, really? These kinds of tropes again with this kind of a character?" So he seemed pretty cookie cutter.
He does it a bunch of times.
Yeah, he was just totally cookie cutter and a 1 out of 5. So then let's go to Hera. I mean, Hera's a completely made up character. I just had a hard time the entire time watching her. The voice acting was good. She held her own as a voice actress, but I think she was given a poor character because her character was not dynamic at all whatsoever. She started off not wanting to marry men, and she ended off not wanting to marry men. She started off as a great swordsman, horseman, strategist. She ended up as a great swordsman, horseman, strategist. She started off having a great relationship with her family, and having a antagonistic relationship with Wolf. She ended up having a great relationship with her family and an antagonistic relationship with Wolf. So there was no dynamicness to her character at all. As a main character, you really want to see some sort of change. You want to root for them to do the right thing. You want to see them grow and become better in some way or another. And even you see that in the Fellowship of the Ring with Frodo, right? He's the main character. You want to see him make the hard decisions and do that, right? He goes from the dancing hobbit at Bilbo's birthday party to the one who's willing to abandon even Sam in order to do the right thing and take the ring to Mount Doom, right? He grows, he makes the hard decisions, he sacrifices. None of that happens here with Hera. She's capable the entire time. So as an acting, she did fine, 4 out of 5. As a character, she was insufferably perfect. So 1 out of 5.
Yeah, and I'm gonna expand that to the whole show. Like the characters, the voice acting to me was decent, was pretty good actually in some cases, but not standout. A lot of that comes down to the dialogue that they're given and what they can do with it. But the characters themselves are eminently forgettable. Not a single character has any change or learns anything. The closest you can get is Helm, the shift of Helm from king to wraith, and despairing wraith. That that was almost forced by the story itself. I don't give them any credit for that because that's Tolkien's story. So if you're going to introduce a character, and especially if you're going to make it a main character like Hera, and it is an introduction of a character because Tolkien doesn't even give her a name. She's a real person in his world, but the story he had to tell was not the story of Hera. They want to tell a story about the daughter of Helm Hammerhand, and if you're going to do that, you're going to need to make me care about that character. You're going to need to make me going to need to show me she's not a Mary Sue, that she's not just perfect to start with. But that's exactly now. She isn't perfect in the sense that she's a total girl boss. There was a couple girl boss moments, but she wasn't like Galadriel from Rings of Power. She's bested physically. She's kidnapped at one point. She's she needs her horse to help defeat Lord Thorn, and Lord Thorn's no great warrior. He's a warrior, but he's not. So, and until the very end, she doesn't girl boss it up that much. Like you said, she kills the troll. You said large orc. I think he's actually a troll. That Helm Hammerhand gets in a fist fight with, but in her non-physical attributes, she's basically makes no mistakes. She's perfect from the beginning. She's always right. Her judgment is the correct one. Everyone should have just been listening to her all along. There's no character development at all. She's a moral Mary Sue, and that's just tiresome. And it follows this trope of the sort of feminist girl boss trope. Doesn't quite go all the way to the full girl boss, take it to 11, but it's boring. And we don't see any character development with Freyaloth. We don't see any character development with Hama or Haleth. And so we're not going to. We should care. Like they're her brothers, and they die. Right. But I don't really care. Like even Wolf doesn't change. Nobody changes. Right. Everyone's the exact same character they started with.
Right. And they had an opportunity to do this because they had the character of Olwen, who they said was the Shield Maiden who was there. I don't even remember the whole story, but the idea was that they were attacked, all the men were died, and so the Shield Maiden took in a Rohirrim town of some sort. The Shield Maidens took up arms, defeated all the attackers, and that's the great story.
And then they became their own noble house, apparently. Like that was like
that's right,
feminist trope where they got their own seal, and now they're just the Shield Maidens.
So and didn't the Lords want to bring down the seal? Like it's been long enough. It's been up there long enough. It's time to take it down. Yeah,
exactly.
So they have this whole thing with Olwen. They don't even show Olwen training Hera. They don't show anything about Hera in any process at all. They had 4 years. They could have spent that time in saying like, this is how Hera changed over those 4 years in order to defend her people. And she became more than she was, kind of like when the other Haleth from the Silmarillion was when her brother and her father and her brothers were killed. And she had to, take command of her people and lead them into safety and fight back the orcs that were attacking them as they were heading eastward, I believe, near the marches of Doriath. And she protected her people, but she had to learn that over time. She's perfect right away. And like you said, all the characters are exactly the same from beginning to end. Even Freyaloth he's the great, he's the right person for the job in the beginning, and he's the right person for the job in the end. I will take a little bit of of an opposing point when it comes to the girl bossing of Hera, because the final scene of Hera that I mentioned is her besting Wolf, who's
I said
the leader.
That one.
I mean, that's kind of huge. So they totally girl bossed her into that, and not only that, like she does know where to take the Mumakil. She does have all the strategy right from beginning to end. She knows exactly what's going to happen. She's the one who figures out she figures out that Thorn is the traitor. She figures out that that where the secret passageway is. She figures out that it's a siege tower. She figures out everything. And so even then, like, and the one scene they have when she's a young kid is she bests Wolf then too. I'm just like, she's not.
We're going to get to the. I was going to get to the final scenes and her action.
All right. Okay. Let's do that. Let's go to the dialogue. Go ahead.
Dialogue. I actually, and remember, we're distinguishing dialogue from plot and storyline. The actual character of the words as spoken. Do they have the ring of Tolkien and his words? Because this is an interesting one, because there is no dialogue in Tolkien, or almost none. There's like 2 or 3 lines from the appendices that people actually speak. And everything else is just Tolkien telling us what happened. So all this dialogue is invented. And do they do a decent job? Does Boyen's do a decent job? And whoever the other writer or two writers were with her, I can't remember. And I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. The character of the way they speak there were a couple of exceptions, but the character of the way they speak generally throughout the movie was in line with Tolkien's words. They're not it's not as great as Tolkien, but generally speaking, the way they spoke to the way they interact with each other has that old medieval Anglo-Saxon ring to it, generally speaking. And so I was pleasantly surprised by that. And so I thought the dialogue as written wasn't it definitely isn't the tortured rings of power. There is a tempest in me, and all their idioms that they're always coming up with to try to convince us that they're really writing Tolkien-esque language.
Yeah.
Boyens and the other two writers do actually a decent job of creating Tolkien-esque dialogue style.
It doesn't feel forced at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. The only line that stood out to me that still confused me, which was in the trailer, which is you could have ruled the world, or you can rule the world. I'm just like, I don't.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me at all. That's sort of like trying to make her even more than she already is, and they don't need to do that. They didn't need to do that at all. So, I agree with you on the dialogue. It didn't pull me out of that part of the film at all.
Yeah.
All right. So the story. So I don't know. Yeah, I'll give the dialogue a 4 out of 5. And plus, like you said, it was written by Boyens mostly, and then her daughter. What's her name?
Was it her daughter? Okay.
Phoebe Gittins is her daughter.
Okay.
Another guy named Artie Papagiorgio. In any case, yeah, that was good. So then the story, and as we know, this kind of goes hand in hand, kind of with the lore, but we'll talk about that a little bit separately. Let's pretend that this story was not based on something Tolkien had wrote and was just its own story. So as a story, like we talked already about, like you have no dynamic characters in here. So they missed out on the characters necessary to pull off a story that impacts you as a viewer. But then the other problem that hounded this story the entire time are the whys that weren't answered. For instance, why are the Southrons there? Like, we know why. Like, they never explained why did they make it all the way over there? Are they there just to help the Dunlandings, or do they have some other greater plan, which was probably to assault Gondor? Why was Thorn a traitor? What did he get out of it? They just said he was, and nothing ever led up into that point, unless I missed something, but I don't think so.
No.
Why was Thorn a traitor? Why was Hera a good strategist, a good swordsman, a good horseman? They didn't show us anything that would have put her in that position in those intervening years when she defends Helms Deep, or she knows everything about Helms Deep. Right. How and why did Wolf gather all these Dunlandings? What was his role? Like, what process did he go? All of a sudden, he's just there in Isengard with a ton of people and Southrons. Like, why? Where's the lead up to any of this? Why does Helm die meaninglessly? He says, she's like, Father, no, Rohan needs you, and he says, no, they need you, without offering any explanation about why Hera would actually be any good, because you haven't shown us the explanation. It's time for you to tell us the explanation here, though we might not believe you, but he just says it without any sort of factual basis to back that up. Why are there orcs at Helm's Deep in the middle of a siege? Why?
Looking for rings.
Looking for rings. Among all the Dunlandings that were killed, like, why? They didn't lead anything. It's just stuck in there like I don't know, like yellow snow, right? It just seems completely out of place, and you don't want to go near it. And why would you have it? It just seems so oddly put there. It's just really weird. And then why did they copy the Two Towers so completely in Helm's Deep? It feels kind of like, after watching The Force Awakens, it's a copy of Star Wars. This is really just a copy of the Two Towers once Helm's Deep is besieged. And all those whys. So as a story, they never set up anywhere to give you an answer to these whys. And so I think the story was inexpertly put together.
Yeah, and I'll add to that pacing. The pacing was absolutely horrible. I was very tired last night when I watched it. I had done a lot, and my kids were there. But this movie was way too long, and the pacing was so uneven and disjointed. And there were moments when you're leading up to a battle, like the first battle when Helm goes out on the plain to meet the Dunlandings, but really there's Thorn is a traitor, and so Edoras is getting attacked while he's from within, and that whole scene. There's this really sort of janky stop and go, and one scene, like the scene one leading to another, just doesn't. It has no good pacing. And then there's the story of them at Helm's Deep, and where they're and once Helm goes into despair, and I actually fell asleep. I fell asleep for 5 minutes. I was so bored. It the pacing was so bad. I didn't have a feeling of anything building to anything else.
Yeah.
We like you mentioned, we have already seen a Siege of Helm's Deep, and it turns out this is just going to be like that one. Down to her riding out her horse downstairs on her own, to go face the enemy.
Down the siege tower instead of the steps of Helms Deep. Yeah, that's right.
So they don't blow a hole in the wall. They drop a. And by the way, there were some funny moments in that. Like, I think unintentionally funny. My favorite guy in the whole second half of the movie was the one drummer on top of the siege tower that kept reaching up farther and farther into the sky. There's this drummer on the top, and he's drumming. I don't know if you remember this.
Maybe I fell asleep too. I don't know. I can't remember.
And then it raises up a level, and he's still drumming, and it raises, and we keep cutting to the siege tower, getting higher and higher. It's still on top, and then it just drops. So you just sacrificed your one cool drummer. But anyway, it's just there was all this random stuff that was in there. Yeah. Some of it member berries, some of it like Oliphants and Watcher in the Water. They actually call it Watcher in the Water.
I just
your story is bad if you can't even put yourself, let's say you want to presume that the Watcher in the Water is one of the creatures of Middle-earth, and there are other creatures like it, and maybe the Rohirrim have come across a creature like it from time to time, a creature of terrible legend. They wouldn't call it a Watcher in the Water, you dumbasses. Sorry.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Have the integrity of story writing to actually write it from the point. They would have had their own name for it. Give us a different name. Do something different.
Yeah. Crebine from Dunland. They put that in there too.
Exactly. Remember when Legolas said
But that was Saruman, and here it's just, they're feeding on the dead body. It's just
but there were so many member berries. My kids were just groaning and it was nice because we were the only ones in the theater, so we groaned and we commented. There we could talk and not disturb anybody. But the story was, it did not do what it's supposed to do and put us in the world and make us care about the characters. It was a conglomeration of member berries and copying of a story we already know. The screen behind me is the real Shield Maiden of Rohan, as written by Tolkien. It's Éowyn, and Hera does not match up to Éowyn. No. She from start to finish. And we're going to go into philosophy about this.
So, what would you give the story then?
Yeah, story is like a 1.5 for me. It was really poor.
I'll give it a 1.5 too.
Yeah, it wasn't. The pacing was a 1. The pacing was terrible. It was one of the worst paced stories movies I've ever come across.
It could have been probably half an hour shorter. It was 2 hours and 15
absolutely
minutes. It could have
been probably 40 minutes shorter, but maybe at least half an hour. Yeah. And it was just and
not only that. I think when you talk about the pacing, there were scenes that were just slow, where nobody talked for a few seconds, and they just lingered on these shots, sometimes on still shots, where you're like, what are we doing? Are you just there so that the music can finish? What's the point? And so not only was it done in the execution of how they created the story, but actually in the execution of the process of creating the movie, right? They made it longer with these awkwardly long intermissional shots. I don't know. It was odd how much time they spent doing things that didn't matter. The amount of, for instance, Hama and his horse, the amount of time they spent on Hama and his slow horse was they wanted you to really feel for the horse and feel for Hama, but it's totally unearned because you get one moment of it and there's no lead up to it. You have no emotional investment into what's happening with him or with the horse.
Even had a scene of a couple minutes where it shows from their past, where it shows. I'm just making stuff up now, but if you see Hama and Hera riding in their youth or riding a few years ago, and you show Hama showing tenderness towards his horse, and we learn the horse's name, 100%. And in their shot,
why?
And Hera talks about how old the horse is, but Hama defends the horse because he loves her.
For instance,
that would be it.
Instead of having Freyalaf there in the beginning with finding the Southern, have Hama with his slow horse, and she has to defend him against the. Now we're going to the extended edition, but yeah, it's a scene like that where if you want to introduce Hama and have a relationship with him and make him important and his death important, then create that emotional resonance that's necessary to give us to make it pay off in the end. Otherwise, we don't care. We don't care that his horse is slow. We don't care that he has a relationship with his horse. What if the horse almost died from the Oliphant and they were able to nurse it back to health, and they kind of spend a moment on that? So, okay, now the horse has survived, but now the horse lets him down in the end and Hama dies. So anyway, okay, yeah. That's the story.
There's 100 ways. 100 you could do it. So story is poor. Story was poor.
1.5. Pacing was also poor. 1.
Pacing was terrible. Story was subpar, and seriously subpar. And it was seriously subpar because I don't give them credit for the story where they matched Tolkien. I want them, like, they're writing a movie story, and so they need to include and stay true to Tolkien. And let's move from here to the lore now, because now we're talking about what Tolkien wrote versus what they wrote. And I think I don't give them credit for that, except unless they were eminently true to the lore. Now, what do you think about the lore wise? Because I saw a couple of major deviations from the lore, and some atmospheric lore and stuff that I liked. But then a couple of massive deviations, and some of them, it gets into the philosophy, which I'm going to talk about. But what did you think of the lore?
When you talk about the lore, right, of course, you have to start with the idea of Hera. Hera has been a completely new character introduced into the film. That's right. And Hera is a 2000s type of woman again, right? At this time, nobody married for love. You married for power and convenience. And so for her to say, I will marry no man, would be not only an affront to Freka and Wolf, but to her father. And so to introduce that into here, I thought was silly, was against what Tolkien wrote, but they had to go with it. And so because of that, it becomes this river that has all these tributaries into the story that kind of ruin it. So that's where it started. And let me get to where it ended, because this is my disappointment. And I talked about this here with the Two Towers, and then we can talk about what's in the middle. So it started with Hera being a 2024 kind of woman, almost 2025. Everybody, Happy New Year. Where she's the kind of woman that would fit in right here in modern day. But you don't want that. Like you were talking about Éowyn before. Éowyn would not fit in modern day because she knew her place in a way, and she ended up accepting it, but she still was like her father looked at her as the girl he had to protect, but she was Éowyn. She was not going to be a fighter. Here, she's the best at everything, and nobody blinks at all. Everybody is totally fine with her being the best at everything, and it's somehow totally okay. She's the best strategist, but nobody really worries about it. Not that she's sitting there doing the strategy, but she's there. They're telling us how everything's going to happen, and who's the traitor, and where the hidden door is, and what look, it's a siege engine, and don't give up, lords that are sitting here around the table again doing nothing. The lords literally do nothing. They sit around tables, and you don't see them doing anything else. Hera's the only one that does anything. Okay, so then the final scene is Freyalaf riding down the same hill that Gandalf rode down in the Two Towers in order to save all of those holed up in Helm's Deep. When in the story, in the lore, here's what Tolkien wrote. Soon after the winter broke, then Freyalaf, son of Hild, Helm's sister, came down out of Dunharrow, to which many had fled, and with a small company of desperate men, he surprised Wolf in Meduseld and slew him and regained Edoras. I like the idea of it being a small company of desperate men, and they missed that opportunity to make that, because you couldn't have Hera be if she was leading people, like she couldn't be the girl boss. Sorry, Michael, I know she's still a girl boss to me. The strategically masterful girl boss that defeats Wolf and is able to get Freyalaf there in time. And so I don't know, that's where the bookend of the stories, that's where it really bothered me. It started off wrong and it ended off wrong. And I wish they would have been able to, I thought Hera was going to break the siege, somehow do something there to break the siege, and then meet up with Freyalaf in Meduseld and retake it. But no, it's he comes and
they just cut the whole part of that out. And I just, the fact that they have Hera kill Wolf and then how they have her do it, this is the biggest girl boss moment. But everything else up to it, she's not in the physical realm, but not always in the physical realm besting people, but but she's besting everyone. Like she's the only one with a good plan. You have a whole bunch of lords hold up there. Not a single one of them comes up with anything. They're just standing around, and she's got all the great. She knows how to save people. She notices everything. She's good at everything. And then in the end, she bests a Rohirrim Dunlendine warrior in one-on-one combat,
wearing a wedding dress.
Wearing a wedding dress, and she, in a laughable way. It's utterly laughable. She even crushes his throat with the shield, overpowering him hand to hand. Like literally, their arms are against each other.
Yeah, and then she pushes and she kicks him back.
Overpowers him. Yeah. And this is like her shield maiden. What's her name? Olwen.
Yeah.
Like kicking or blowing someone. She didn't kick a door open. She blew a door open by slamming somebody else through a door that actually just blew it apart like superhero style.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So basically, we have a bunch of Amazonians, and at the end scene when Helms Deep is about to fall. It's not quite Helms Deep yet, but when the Hornburg is about to fall, who is it that has the plan and is going to carry it out? That's going to save everyone, or at least hold them off so people can be saved. It's the three women. It's the old woman, the middle-aged woman, and the young woman. There was that old woman in the tower with the wedding dress.
That's right.
And I just, the story-wise, this is classic. I mean, she doesn't, as you mentioned, she's not going to ever marry, and marrying isn't for her. This is completely the opposite of everyone even Éowyn understands this is the role of royalty in Middle Earth and in her culture. And while she bristles at the fact that she can't take up arms when a foe with the rest of the army, which she then ends up doing ultimately, she also ultimately is happy to be married. She falls in love and is married to the man that becomes the Prince of Ithilien. And so she is literally married off to a Prince of Gondor.
Yeah, right.
In the Lord of the Rings, and Hera is obviously supposed to be a precursor to Éowyn, but I vastly prefer Éowyn, who faced down the Witch King, but with the help of barrow blades and a halfling, essentially the hand of God,
right.
is able to best this great evil. But she herself almost perishes in the attempt, and so she's not this good at everything, and nobody ever, nobody can beat her.
Right. And they show her fear, right? They show Éowyn's fear as she's riding down with Merry. And so she earns that in the end, right? Her shield, Éowyn's shield is exploded. I'm talking about the movie, right? And she's in pain, and and then Merry distracts her with what is officially an actual sword meant to destroy or rip sinew from flesh, rip soul from sinew, I think is the way Tolkien put it, with the sword that he got from the Barrow Downs. But it's earned, right? You feel the fear. I have no fear that Hera is ever going to be in danger, because she's never failed before. She's never, not even in battle with him, she's nicked ever so slightly. But you think at one point they try to pull it off as if he comes up to her and somehow has stabbed her, but I guess she's been able to push his arm to the side, and so he doesn't stab her. And that's when she's stronger than him and pushes him away and kicks him down and then crushes his throat with the shield that Owen, like Captain America, throws to her in order to use.
Yes, the Captain America moment. So lore-wise, the big fails were that they didn't have Freyaloth killing Wolf and taking back Edoras. The lore, but I have a nit to pick with regard to their portrayal of Helm Hammerhand. So Helms, first of all, in the actual lore, Helm is the aggressor. He is not like in the movie War of the Rohirrim. He's out there and it's like this trial by combat outside where everyone's sitting around watching, as opposed to what happens in the book where he pulls Freka off to the side on his own, and Freka's guards leave. They're basically realizing that they can't do anything. It's just going to be one-on-one. But then Helm is the aggressor, and like this is very Anglo-Saxon. Like his honor has been slighted, and Freka has done a thing which makes him look bad to his lords, so he's going to respond. And in the movie, he's like he kills Freka with one punch, so kudos for that, I guess, lore wise. But then he's looking around, he's like, "You all saw it. It was just one punch." It's like,
you're right.
Whining, dude. What the heck? What are you doing?
You should have been now. Get out! Don't come back. Right? That's sort of idea.
Imposition of 21st century morality onto an Anglo-Saxon society from Tolkien's world that wouldn't have responded that way. And then his whining about his whole basically he should have believed Hera all along. Hera was the right one.
Yeah.
And then the whole Queen of the World crap. And the fact ultimately that he gave his life pointlessly when he didn't have to. Now, it was one thing in the books where he goes out in despair and basically becomes this force of nature, killing and frightening the besieging army over a whole winter, which and you can say there's a kind of sort of desperate, maybe even a near suicidal desire on his part, where he's going out there killing people with his hands, and he's in despair because of the death of his sons, and so I can imagine that's the case, but in the movie, he literally pointlessly gives up his life.
Yes,
he didn't have.
That was the worst.
He could have gone in, closed the doors, and lived, and kept doing what he'd been doing.
Yes, right.
Up to that point, but if he's not going to have a change of heart, but he doesn't, and he just it's pointless. It's not actually pointless. The point is for us to find out how awesome Hera is.
Right. But it's an unearned point. The movies do this all the time.
Himself for the sake of the girl boss, but like you say, nothing's earned on the girl boss's part. He's just telling her how awesome she is. Yeah. Then he's going to let himself die because of it.
Yeah, this is where the lore is a problem, right? Because it's the story of Helm Hammerhand, or it's the story of Rohan, the greatest story of Rohan in a way, because that's what Tolkien decided to spend the most time on when it comes to writing a story about Rohan. And to have it be from Helm's perspective, and then Helm, in his desperation, he does end up dying, as Tolkien wrote. One night, men heard the horn blowing, but Helm did not return. In the morning, there came a sun gleam, the first for long days, and they saw a white figure standing still on the dike alone, for none of the Dunlendings dared come near. There stood Helm, dead as a stone, but his knees were unbent. Yet men said that the horn was still heard at times in the deep, and the wraith of Helm would walk among the foes of Rohan and kill with fear. That should have been a huge part of the film, of Helm in desperation, right? He is the leader of his people, and he sees them in despair, right? There was hunger. They had no place to go. There was no food. So Helm is trying to create something greater, and as the king, doing what a king would do in desperation to try and save his people, he is out there doing, like you said, the things that he should have kept doing and not giving himself up for Hera, who's going to be the greatest ruler of the world. And so that, to me, like that whole scene of Helm's Deep, this is why it feels so similar to the Two Towers, because in the Two Towers, you don't have that utter desperation of being there for a long time. There is some, but what they should have done is they should have leaned into that desperation more and had Helm be the one who is there as a king. They barely show Helm as a king at all, encouraging his people. That's what they could have done at that time. That's what they did in the Two Towers with Aragorn, encouraging the young kids. It's a good sword. They had a couple of those scenes in order to show him as a king. They needed to do the same thing with Helm's Deep with Helm Hammerhand and show him as a king in Helm's Deep. But they realized if they did that would take away from Hera, so they couldn't do it. They had to just kill him off in the most inane and pointless way possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
agreed. So that's my take. Philosophically, this is not Tolkien. Philosophically, this is a 21st century proto-feminist tale. They're trying to imitate Éowyn. Tolkien, there are so many subtle differences between Éowyn and Hera that are very important philosophically. We mentioned some of them, one of which is Éowyn is actually in love. She's in love with Aragorn. Remember, she's besotted with Aragorn.
That's right.
There's a whole side of her which she's not proto-feminist anti-man. Now, she is not happy with the fact that Aragorn doesn't love her back, but that wasn't what drives her despair. She simply she has a fierce warrior spirit. She wants to defend her people. but afterwards she's not anti-marriage. She doesn't go up her like, and then the whole conceit of the show, that somehow the world of Tolkien would have continued on and no one would have heard about Hera.
That was so dumb.
Really stupid. Really
and
stupid.
Even you realize that the one great story that they tell in the film is the story of the Shield Maidens. So if they're okay telling the story of the Shield Maidens to the Rohirrim in Rohan, why wouldn't they also be okay telling the story of Hera? Yep. It's a distracting, like, don't look over here, look over there because it's not here. This is why it's not there. And they don't give you any reasons for why or anything like that. But let's also bring up the rings. What that is completely unnecessary. They're like, talk about member berries where, you have the Mumakil, okay, you have the Watcher in the Water, okay, there is, at least it does something. That entire ring scene, the whole point of it is just to get them outside, but it's not necessary. Like she could have been.
Yep. Well, she could have just found the secret passage and gone down and been outside.
And seen Helm being crazy and being like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then he comes and talks with her.
Yep.
But no, they had to add these orcs who apparently were voiced by Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan. I realized I
didn't know that.
So I didn't even notice that in the film. And then there's the troll, and then she saves Helm from the troll by throwing a spear into the troll's eye and killing it. And then they're discovered by the Dunlendings, and that's when he dies on the in front of the great door of Helm's Deep. But the idea that you have Sauron having trolls 200 years before the events of the Two Towers, looking for rings randomly near Helm's Deep while there's a siege going on, and they don't even show us where does this exit lead, the secret passageway, where are they going exactly? So we have no ability to understand it, but that would essentially mean that these orcs have somehow walked through near the Dunlendings up near Helm's Deep in order to look for rings from who's up there, and why would they be looking right up near the walls of Helm's Deep? It just felt so out of place. It was really amateurish and completely unnecessary, and it's there just as a way to say I'm going to go talk to Gandalf here at the end of the movie. That's right.
Exactly right.
That's what they wanted. Somebody said, guys, we need to get Gandalf involved in this. We have to have him here. So how are we going to do that? We've got to have orcs looking for rings at this point.
What would have been really funny, I because I have a sick sense of humor. There was that moment when at the end of the movie when she's heading off to go find Gandalf and she's telling Olwen what she's going to do, but she's like, I'm going to go find a wizard, and Olwen's like, does this wizard have a name? And she says, well, he has many names. And
like
I
Sauron
paid so much money for her to say, some call him Grand Elf.
Okay, that's a riff on the Rings of Power. Who the crappy, but not the Harfeet. Who are the other ones? The Stewars. Yeah, the Sewers called him. So he's a large elf. He's a grand elf. Oh, that was so bad. That would have been the cherry on top.
The apparent origin. That would have been classic. I mean classically bad.
Is it as bad as The Rings of Power? No, it's a serviceable film. It's not bad, but it's just not good. It's that mealy mouth middle. Whereas the Rings of Power is just bad. It's bad writing, bad dialogue. The music is the best part of The Rings of Power because Bear McCreary is a good composer. The characters and acting are bad in The Rings of Power. The characters and acting aren't bad here. The dialogue is much better here. The dialogue is horrible in The Rings of Power. So yeah. Right. So if I, on The Rings of Power as a TV show, I give it like a 2 out of 10, maybe a 3 out of 10 if I'm generous. This one, 4 or 5, 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10.
It's just so forgettable. For me, it's between a 5 and a 6 out of 10, like 4, maybe 5, just straight up 5.
Just right there in the middle.
It's very forgettable.
Yeah.
It doesn't inspire the love of Tolkien in me. It doesn't remind me. And it's sad because it could have, because the story of Helm Hammerhand is an awesome story. And you would have had to tell it though, from the point of view of a tragedy. It's like the Children of Hurin. You're going to have to approach it differently. And the philosophic framework that this was approached in was one of 21st century feminism overlay over a story from Lord of the Rings, and ultimately that's just going to make a subpar product. And
and what they should have done is what Peter Jackson famously said to who's that interviewer? Oh, that British interviewer anyway, he said to him, our goal was to put Professor Tolkien's words and ideas into this and not put our own into this. And this entire film started from them putting their own ideas into it, and that's why.
Yeah, and to that final point, let me just say there was one thing I didn't bring up about the philosophy, and we were supposed to believe that this is a really powerful moment because it's referenced twice. They both come at the very end of the movie, and it's when Olwen and Hera are fake Eowyn are talking, and Olwen tells Eowyn, like, this is going to be your choice how to end all this. And it's like, this beautiful thing is like, you finally get choice in life. Yes, the patriarchy has pigeonholed you for most of your life, but now you finally get choice in how to end it. And then it's referenced again when Olwen's trying to go with Eowyn, and Eowyn starts crying and touches her face and says, I have a choice. And this whole thing. Like,
forgot about that.
We're supposed to believe that this is the highest moment. This is like when finally she's heroic and it's all worth it, and this is the hero's journey supposedly, except it isn't, because choice is a thing that happens all the time everywhere. So many people choose how they die, and in this film and in other ways, there's nothing grand or epic about the fact that now it's not even the choice that she makes. It's now you get to choose. And this obsession with, I get my choice over what I do with everything in my life is the height of selfishness, my future, my body, my whatever. It's
funny.
It's this worship of choice, which is so pathetically modern it has no place in Tolkien's
and
world.
Is actually when you talk about it like that, it's the antithesis of what a leader or a king should be. I shouldn't care. I mean, it's being a king is a little bit like being a dad or a mom, right? You lose your ability to choose because you have to do what's better for the family and not what's better for you. A king has to do what's better for his people, not what's better for you.
Yep.
And so she, by Freylof saying to her, "Oh, it should have been you," and she's like, "No, it was never meant to be." Well, it's kind of sad that he sees her that it should have been her, even though selfishly she's been doing what she wants the whole time and been going against what is expected of a woman at that time. But it should have been her. No, but she's selfish, so no, it should not have been her.
Freylof says it should have been her. She should have been queen. Her father says it should have been her. He should have listened to her. He should have been her. Yeah. She should have been his general. The king should have done everything his daughter told him. Everything's all about, it should have been her. She was right all along. Everything that she does is correct. Yeah. There's no, it's, and it's unearned. And, her freedom from men, like that's a big deal in this film, is like, she's never going to marry. It's not just that she doesn't want this particular marriage. She's never going to marry. She's like, I don't need no man thing.
She's like, I don't need a bicycle. I'm a fish.
That's right.
This
fish doesn't need a bicycle. That's right.
That's right. All right, guys, we're going to shut it down. Ultimately, the movie is forgettable. This is why it won't perform well, why it won't be remembered. But it will do what it needed to do, which is maintain the rights for New Line and Warner Brothers to have The Lord of the Rings, so they can do The Hunt for Gollum and whatever else is going to be coming up for them, because it's too much money to ignore. Although if this here is any indication, maybe it won't be too much money. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't even know if they'll make.
Will they be able to de-age Aragorn for an entire 2.5 hours?
Geez.
So we'll see. All right, we're gonna shut it down, guys. If you want to listen to us talk about what we would have changed in this here and how we would have done it, particularly I want to talk about how we would have gotten them out of Helm's Deep, because Tolkien doesn't talk about that at all. He talks about how they're besieged at Helm's Deep, or they retreat to Helm's Deep. And they were besieged there, but it doesn't talk after Helm dies. All we get is soon after the winter broke, Freylof, son of Hild, Helm's sister, came down out of Dunharrow, right? So, but to Mediceld, right? He kills Wolf in Mediceld. So we're going to talk about that. What we would have done right there,
and he kills Wolf,
he kills Wolf. He does kill
Wolf. This is like my last point. Is like, this is the great, like we take it as given because we found out a long time ago that Hera was going to be the main character. But why? Why is Hera the main character of this story? This should not have happened. This story should never have been told, because it's not Hera, it's not the daughter that kills Wolf, that kills the main aggressor.
No, it's not. So if you want to hear us talk more about this film or what film should have been made, go to thewondering.com/member, become a member, get the extended podcast. Go to Patreon, thewondering.com/Patreon. You can get that. Its first month is free, $4 a month, or on Patreon, first week is free at $5 a month. Guys, thanks again. Happy New Year. We'll catch you next year as we're back on The Hobbit. And
Merry Christmas, freeloaders.